All right, everybody, welcome to the Thursday episode of Locked On NHL. I am Chris Maselli from Locked On Avalanche. With me, as always, Mr. Mixtape Adam Denker from Locked On Lightning. On today's episode, we obviously have our Thursday Power Rankings, doing it a little bit different this week. It's by division, so we'll power rank the division. And Jack Eichel going back to Buffalo. Is it a big deal anymore? Or when does it stop becoming a big deal? We'll talk about that and wherever else discussion takes us. Locked On NHL right now.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome into the Thursday episode of Locked On NHL. Like I said, I am Chris Maselli with Locked On Avalanche, and with me as always for the Thursday episode, Mr. Adam Denker from Locked On Lightning. It's Thursday, so we have power rankings to get to. We'll get to those in a minute, and like I said in the opening, we're not just going to do 1 through 32. We divided up the divisions, and we are going to do it that way. And I say we, I mean the hosts. I have to preface that all the time so people aren't constantly just yelling at Denker and I. But these are voted on from the hosts across Locked On NHL. But before we get started, thank you for making this your first listen of the day. That is always appreciated. You can follow us on our social media outlets over at Locked On NHL on Twitter and, of course, on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and follow to our channel over on YouTube. All right, man, before we get to the rankings, just going through like Locked On NHL and the, or not Locked On, NHL.com. And the main story there is Jack Eichel returning to Buffalo. And I saw that and I'm like, oh, wow, it must be the first time he's going back to Buffalo. And you had to read the article to know that it's not. I forgot that he had returned there last year. So this is the second time. And it made me think like, okay, like, do we care anymore? Should we care? Like, how many times are we going to care that Jack Eichel is going to return to Buffalo before it's just another game? Like, is this going to be for the rest of his career? Like for the way that he left? Or for the first one, I get. And the second one, maybe it's obviously a little bit less. Is it just going to keep getting less and less and less until we don't care anymore? But how long is that going to be?
It's funny, Chris, because when you first mentioned it to me, when we were brainstorming about what to talk about, at first when you said Eichel back to Buffalo, I said, okay, that's cool. Like, is this really the first time since he's been back there? And then once you said second, I immediately stopped caring. So I think that's going to be the general idea about fans when they tune in on ESPN Plus or whatever local, if you're the fan of Vegas or Buffalo on your local channels, just the general hockey fan. I think once they're like, oh, this is like not the first time he's been back, I think like the excitement level will immediately drop off the table. And I think maybe some people might actually listen. That's a big turnoff to a lot of people, especially, oh, you tune in, Eichel back to Buffalo, sweet. And then, you turn on ESPN Plus, you're ready to go. And it's like, in his second game back in Buffalo since being traded. Oh, and then bam, let me put on the Rangers and Red Wings because that's a little bit more better. So that's how I feel about it. But yeah, I mean, if a lot of people still care that like him going back is a big deal, I mean, it's not like we're having it should be for more so Eichel and the Knights versus the Buffalo Sabres who are having a good season. I think you should look at it that way instead of like it being one storyline, one game, or wrapped around one player. So I mean, if you're still salty, if the only reason you're caring is because you're salty he left, get over it. That's
well,
at this point.
But the funny thing with him is, how it all went down is not necessarily his fault. Like, right. If people want to be angry, you could be angry at the Sabres front office for kind of not letting him go the route he wanted to go with his operation. That was just a weird situation. I get it. But I don't know. Like I should they be welcoming to him? I mean, the first time he played, and reading the article, obviously it's a short article, obviously not a big deal, but I guess he went back there in March 10th. Yeah. And if my memory serves me, I think he came back on the ice with Vegas in like February. So he wasn't back for very long before he played that game in Buffalo. Didn't score a point. Vegas lost the game. So now it's like, do you, I'm not saying you welcome him back with like open arms or anything, but like you said, is there just a getting over it period where it's like, okay, it was last year, we had our boos out for you last year, and now we move on? Or is it just going to be those hurt Sabres fans that just will never let this go? And every time he comes back, it's going to be a big deal, and they're going to stick it to Jack Eichel for leaving. And now they have a good team, or a better team, I should say that. So now, I mean, if they had a bad team and he kept coming back and he kept sticking it to you, you're not really going to, you're going to care, but it's not going to be like we have a chance to beat him. They have a genuine chance to beat them every time he comes. So it's just that added, like, yeah, we want to get the win, especially against Eichel, who isn't here anymore.
Yeah, and you made a good point. It wasn't his fault when he left. That was just a weird situation. If you want to hate on anyone, hate the Sabres front office, the ownership.
Make a case for it.
That was a catastrophe. I mean, that was probably one of the times where the Sabres were the talk of the league, and they shouldn't have been. Solely based on, I mean, that was as ugly as it gets between a team and their own player. And for it dragging on that long, I mean, yeah, I think all it does is kind of it really just starts the process that you and I are having right now. It's like, wait, why do we hate Jack Eichel again? And then they'll go back and research the whole thing. It's like, oh, the Sabres did this to him. So I guess like maybe a lot of people will watch the game and hate watch because, I kind of will walk back my comments from before saying, oh, this is only his, people will be turned off to the fact this isn't like his first time back. Maybe once they start researching and realize and remember, oh crap, like this is A, B, and C happen, and that's why he's in Vegas. Maybe they'll hate watch and root for Vegas. And I know you hate that. You hate to hear that.
Like that. Yeah.
But that would probably be the reality and probably the selling point for ESPN if they were smart about it.
What about just players like him moving to a different team for whatever reason, coming back, whether it's the first time or the fifth time or the 10th time, and how, just in general, just how should fans be welcoming to a player who's returning? Because, and I ask that because, and I'm just in the grand scheme, not just hockey. Because a lot of people ask me like, oh, who's your favorite player on the Avs? And I always say like, I don't have one, because I think that the time of getting attached to players, you can't do that anymore because they're out the door. Like, well, I shouldn't say they're out there. There's a good chance like those Derek Jeter spending 20 years with one organization doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
And it's just the way of the world. It's the way of the sports world. So I don't get attached. Like, I have a favorite team and I root for the team, and whoever's wearing that uniform is who I root for. It's very tough for me to get attached to a singular player because I'm just preparing myself for if they do end up signing somewhere else or getting traded. I don't want to be let down. I just avoid that part of it. Having said that, Cale Makar is very close to, being my favorite player maybe ever, but I'm not there. I just, you know what I mean? So with that aspect of players in all sports just moving all over the place because of free agency and money getting thrown around, do you think fans should be a little bit more reasonable with, if this player leaves and he comes back, I'm not going to boo him because he's not the first to leave because of free agency. He's not going to be the last.
Well, I have to ask, after hearing all of that, Chris, who hurt you? Because it feels like you're projecting now.
I want to talk about it.
It feels like you're projecting. No, but I mean, I agree. And to a certain extent, but I feel like if the situation, it depends, if a player, let's say like your team was on the verge of winning a championship and they just didn't have that extra push. Like, for example, let's say if Stamkos left after 2019 when the Lightning collapsed in the playoffs and went somewhere else,
right,
and then ended up winning. Yes, that's different. But I mean, the Sabres never even had remotely a shot at a playoff spot. So I mean, there really wasn't much there. And then all that dysfunctionality of pissing off your franchise face. I don't think fans should be mad about it. I think, like I said, I think really it's kind of like like, of course, like he left. It's kind of like how Met fans feel. I feel like
Mhm.
Saber fans will feel the same way.
Right.
Just be like, well, that's our team. That's what we do. We let the best players go. So I feel like it's kind of that. And I also feel like, yeah, I mean, after a certain amount of time, you just have to get over it. I mean, even if you see your player, and I think that's part of the reason why the Sabres made it a point not to trade him into the Eastern Conference, so they wouldn't be having
Mhm.
this issue multiple times a year.
Yeah, but I think it's different when a player's at the end of his career. If he's towards the end and he hasn't won anything, and like look at Claude Giroux last year. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like I can kind of get that. But when a player is in like the prime and the LeBron James taking my talents to South Beach thing, like, yeah, Cleveland fans for that moment in time, obviously he came back and won a championship with them, but I can totally see when the player of that caliber walks. It's
yeah.
it's different for every player. So I guess there's really no singular right answer for this, but for me, I just avoid it by not getting attached to players. So it's the route to go. I've been through a lot of therapy, so it helps. All right, let's hear from Bet Online, and then we have our power rankings to get to. Like we said, we have some different format this week by divisions. But first, betonline.net, it's your number one source for betting sports info, stats, and news and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports, and of course the NHL. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well at BetOnline. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's betonline.net. It's where the game starts. All right, so let's bring up these power rankings for the week. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see them on the screen. Let's put them up here. Let's move the screen around. Not that one. Not that one. There we go. And yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, you got them right on your screen. If you're not, well, we're going to do this by division. So usually we do the top 10, but we don't have that. So we'll just start on the left-hand side of the screen, Denker, and that's the Atlantic. No surprise, the Bruins have been number one overall for a couple weeks now. So they're number one in the Atlantic. You have the Maple Leafs at number 2, the Lightning at number 3, the Red Wings at 4, Panthers at 5, Sabres at 6, Canadians at 7, and the Ottawa Senators at number 8 in the Atlantic. What are you thinking?
Well, Chris, I just like to say to the hosts that voted Tampa in third for the Atlantic, I appreciate the kind gesture, but this team needs to be lower. And maybe I'm being biased. I just think that if you're like me and watch Tampa on a nightly basis, it's really just a roller coaster of emotions thus far. But I think the
What are
Red
they?
Wings are
Let's
having
see.
I think the Red Wings are having a hell of a season. I think, one could make the case for them to be in the third spot, and just move Tampa a spot down below between Detroit and Florida. But going to Boston real quick, I mean, they have been having a fantastic start to the season. I don't think anyone, including myself, really predicted that they were going to be this good and be in the
No.
conversation for one of the best teams in the league. I mean, and then on the other side of that, I can't believe Toronto. I mean, Toronto same thing as Tampa. They're in second in our rankings, but I mean, Tampa and Toronto are in the same conversation for teams that have just not have played well whatsoever. Now John Cooper has a little bit of wiggling room just because he's won 2 cups, went to 3 straight finals in a row. Whereas, I feel like if this continues in Toronto, we've spoken about this, I believe, on the last episode, Chris, heads could start to roll up in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be pointless to do it at any point during the season. I think depending on Toronto wants to see how the season finishes before they do anything. I mean, if you do it during the season, you're basically saying, "Yep, we're giving up on the season." If you want to do that, go ahead, fine. But that's what you're basically telling your fan base. You should be in it at least as a playoff spot. See what happens. You never know what happens when you get in the playoffs. I think the Lightning are the the poster boys for that, just getting into the playoffs and seeing what happens. But if it doesn't end the way you want it to end, then you make decisions. You're not going to do it right now. You're not going to do it in November. I mean, you look at just the overall standings, not our power ranking for the Atlantic, and yeah, I mean, right now Boston is head and shoulders above everybody else. As far as the standings go, you have points wise the Red Wings, the Panthers, and the Maple Leafs all with 17. The Red Wings have a game in hand on those other two teams. And then the Lightning are 2 points back with 15. So should the Red Wings be, I mean, they're fourth here. I think they should be up at second right now. I do. I would put them at second. And do you feel like the Panthers should be above both the Lightning and the Maple Leafs?
I mean, in that situation, I would really have to go off points and games in hand. So yeah, I mean, Florida, Detroit. Well, Florida and Toronto, I think, are interchangeable in spots. I think some people can make the case for that, but yeah, it's just been a weird kind of part of the season thus far in the Atlantic Division where you just kind of have these three teams along with just huddled together in points, and we're still waiting for someone to go up and go after the Bruins. So I know Tampa's not going to do it. I think my strong pick, I think for next week right now is, and then we can move on to the Metro. Is I would probably expect the Red Wings to maybe take a jump and get into that third spot in the Atlantic Division, and because they're a good team, Chris. I mean, they don't really have one player that they kind of remind me like of the Hurricanes, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who not crazy amount of superstars, but they don't need it. They just play very well as a team, and that's all you need.
And when I'll say the Senators are letting me down. I had the Senators as a wild card, and it's just the same old Sens, which is just sad because
if Ryan Reynolds buys the Senators, do they automatically get bumped up to into the first spot?
No, and you want to know why? Because Ryan Reynolds it would be fitting for him to buy the Senators because we're getting the same old Sens right now, just like we get the same old character with no matter what role Ryan Reynolds plays. Hang that on your wall. All right.
And there goes our chances of ever getting him as a guest.
It's never going to happen. All right, let's move over to the Metro. And you got, for our rankings, the Devils at number 1, the Canes at number 2, the Islanders at number 3, Rangers at 4, Flyers at 5, Capitals at 6, Penguins just keep taking a dive here at 7, and the Columbus Blue Jackets at 8. I mean, everybody's high right now. I mean, why not? The Devils are one of the hottest teams in the league right now. As we're recording this, they've got 7 wins in a row. So there's no denying they're a hot team. So want to see if they can keep this up over the duration of a season. But I think that's, I mean, right now it's a little bit of a surprise. And you look at the standings, the Islanders standing wise are above the Hurricanes. Hurricanes do have a game in hand, but point wise, Islanders with 18 to Carolina 17. They're flip-flopped in our rankings. But so are you okay with that right now of the 1, 2, and 3, I would say, between the Devils, the Canes, and the Islanders?
Yeah, I am. I think the Islanders and Hurricanes are playing fantastic. I mean, I think we both agree that the Devils are having a fantastic season, and let's see how they continue to build off of that with Andre Palat being out for an extended period of time. I was able to see the Hurricanes a couple of weeks ago play the Lightning, and I have to say thus far, just one of the most impressive performances I've seen by an opposing team this season.
Yeah. Wow.
They are just stock, lock, and barrel solid from their first line to their third line pairing. It's pretty impressive what's going on over with Carolina.
Yeah, they're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
There were a lot of pundits and journalists. Like they were a pick for a lot of people. So they will. How we're saying, like, we'll see how the season pans out for the Devils over the course of 82 games. Like, we know the Canes will be there. No doubt about it. Islanders are a funny one. Islanders took a lot of heat in the offseason for doing next to nothing.
Yeah.
And this is where it's like, there's smarter people in the room. You have a lot of people who do podcasts and things like that and say, like, what are they doing? They're doing nothing. And they just felt like, we don't need to make any big moves. And right now, they're right. They're right. Like, this is it's a shock for me. I thought they would be better. I didn't think they would have the same season as they did last year, because you go behind even that season and they were a good team.
Yeah.
But they weren't good enough to get over the hump. So that's why you make some moves here and there, and they didn't do that. And I feel like people were thinking, like, oh, they're going to be, have another struggling season. You just, the front office just didn't feel that way. And they're being proven right now.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to them. I'm eating my words right now, because I said they weren't going to do nothing. They don't have any scoring, and their goal differential right now is plus 13. And they're playing tight games, and they're winning those tight games. So you know what? I mean, could the lack of moves in this past off season eventually bite them down the road? Potentially. Especially when the injury bug starts to rear its ugly
maybe
head.
they're looking at, like, our moves. We'll see what we have to start the season. And then if we need to make moves, we'll make moves at the trade deadline.
Right.
So we're not going to go in big splash for free agency. We'll see where we're at. And if we're at a good shot at it, we'll make some moves at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Could happen.
Yeah. And then going from the Islanders real quick to a team that I have to say, Chris, is pretty disappointing, is Columbus. Just took a complete nosedive from the beginning of the season. I figured at least something, if you have Line A and then you get the prize free agent in Johnny Hockey, that something had to give, and it's just more of the same from this Blue Jackets team.
It might even be worse, man. It might even be worse. Like, I don't know. I don't know how it could be more of the same when you have one of the best players in the league come over, which was a shocker, and to at least not start the season on a high of just having him there, and he just makes everybody around him better. And you're 3-9-0 in your first 12 games. You've lost 5 straight. It's just all ugly. And I watched him play 2 games in a row against the Avalanche over in Finland, and there's just nothing there. There's no life. Yeah, your top line is pretty good, but they could not get anything going. Yeah, you're playing a good Avalanche team. I said they didn't get anything going. They did come back at one aspect. The Avs were up 3-0. They came back and tied it.
Yeah.
But you just saw Colorado just say, like, all right, enough's enough. We're just going to impose our will right now. And they scored 2 more goals, and that was it. And then in the second game, it was 5-1. They had no shot. They're lifeless. They're just completely lifeless right now. And it's going to be a long season for Blue Jackets fans.
I bet Johnny Hockey's kind of regretting signing there instead of New Jersey.
I don't know.
Now.
I mean, he wanted to go back east. He didn't go. Well, what I'll say is and I shouldn't say he's regretting it, because I think he tried. I think the word was he wanted to be with the Devils, and the Devils wanted to make it work. They just couldn't make the money work. Right. So, I mean, if he had gone there, we're not having that conversation on if the Devils can last the season. You know that they are. So he went from one of the hottest teams in the league to a team that's going to be struggling. But the fact that he's there might entice some free agents next year to go there and make them better. But you can't be this bad. If you're this bad, there's going to be free agents who be like, nope, not touching that place. You have to be better and be a little bit competitive for free agents to want to come there. And right now, I think they're getting scared away. So,
yeah. All right. So jumping over to the 2 divisions in the West Western Conference. Let's start with your division, the Central. Dallas up in the first spot. And then you got Winnipeg, who I believe is actually leading that division, Chris.
They are right now, yeah.
What are your thoughts on these top two teams? I don't think anybody expected Winnipeg to be putting out this kind of performance early on or at all this season.
No. Winnipeg and like the Islanders are kind of going like hand in hand, I think. Like last year, Winnipeg was maybe a little bit of a sexy pick for people to maybe not win the whole thing, but have a really good season and definitely make a playoff spot. And they just fell flat. They've played one game against the Avs, and I've seen them play a couple games. Like they're for real. Like they have a very good team. They're not gonna blow you out, and they're not gonna hang 5 or 6 a night on you. But they have some offense. They have really good defense, and they have Connor Hellebuck for a goaltender. Like I think the Jets are gonna hang around. I don't see them falling, to the bottom of these standings. Like I think you're going to have like the Avalanche catch them, and maybe Minnesota, but the Predators are starting to play a little bit better, so we'll see what happens with them. Yeah. But the Jets are going to make life miserable for this division. I don't see them fading.
Yeah, that is pretty surprising. I do like the comparison you made between them and the Islanders. What about Minnesota? Are we going to see more of a drop off from them? We both kind of laughed in the inaugural rankings for the season. I think in the overall, I think Minnesota was 9, and then
they were like 8 or 9,
and then like the next week they were in like the mid 20s.
Yeah. Wow.
So
when you start 0-3-0, and it's ugly, you're going to drop. But they've turned it around. They're starting to play better. They've pulled even. Well, they're 6-1. So as far as points go, they're tied with the Avs, but the Avs have 2 games in hand on them. But Minnesota's. I think they have too much talent on that team. They just started rough, and sometimes because it's the start of a season, people want to jump on a team that starts slow. And think that they're washed up, and Minnesota's not. They're going to be okay.
Yeah. All right, and then finally with the Pacific, we got Vegas, Seattle, and Edmonton. I'm going to start off right away because Lightning played them the other night. We could say a lot about what Edmonton is missing with their line combos. That's always been their story, and now, especially with their goaltending is their situation's a little strange now, but boy, are they still scary when McDavid. I think we've said in the past, like McDavid and Draisaitl may not be enough for this team to be successful down the road, but right now, I mean, McDavid alone is enough. Like it's scary.
It's like you hate just singing this guy's praises all the time, but he's ungodly. Like the play he made the other day. Who were they playing? I can't remember who they were playing, but he just weaved his way in, like right in the house, right through the slot, right up the middle, and he left the puck. He just let the puck go, so he could fend off. It was like he had a lightsaber, and the puck was just sitting there, and he fended off like 3 guys, went back and collected the puck and roofed it. And you're just like, nobody else can do that. Nobody else can do the stuff that he can do. It's amazing to watch it. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like when you start getting into the playoffs, though, you saw it last year. When you start playing those good teams, is that enough? We'll see. I don't know.
I mean, I'm using my own team as a measuring stick right now. He skated through 3 Lightning defenders and took a wrister from an odd angle and beat Vazzy off the bar. It didn't go in, but it wasn't even. I don't even think you could even classify it as a wrist shot because I didn't see the wrist move. That's how good this guy is. I think he's taken it to another level this year where we have to kind of give him a little bit more respect now than we already do, just because he is one of those players. And I saw it this year with like the Lightning team, with the Lightning game and a couple of games that he's played here and there, where he's taking that ability to carry his team to a whole nother level. And it could potentially determine where they finish up in those top 3 spots in the Pacific. And going to a team though right above them, Seattle. I mean, we love to joke and dump on them a little bit here and there, but Seattle's starting to pick it up this year. They've really kind of impressed me throughout thus far this season. I mean, you've seen them a lot more than I have. What can you say about Seattle?
Not a lot more, but I mean, they got 5 wins in a row right now, so that's the longest streak in their franchise history. So, what do they have for? Let me see. Goals for? Yeah, they got 50 goals for. So they're scoring.
Yeah.
Obviously that was a problem last year. So they took guys like from my squad with Andre Burakovsky. He immediately helps you.
Yeah.
So I think you're getting better production from guys that you're getting a little bit better goaltending, but I say that, but you still are giving up. They got 50 goals for, but they have 41 against. You want to make that a little bit better, but at least that you can score. At least that you can keep up with teams right now, and you're never out of it. Last year, they got behind. It was impossible for them to come back. They just didn't have it, and we knew that after they had that draft. Like, okay, they're looking pretty good defensively. Where is the scoring coming from? You're not really asking that this year,
right?
So I think they could hang around there, but you have teams like Edmonton, Calgary really hasn't gotten going yet, and you just expect them to at some point. And the bottom of this division is atrocious with the Sharks, the Ducks, and Vancouver. Maybe we'll be able to turn it around, but it's a top-heavy division, and that top heaviness includes Seattle right now, surprisingly.
Yeah. Like you said, we'll have to wait and see how Calgary does, if they can start to get it going. The Kings look like a good team. I really was high on the Kings and the Ducks last season, and especially going into this year. I could see Trevor Zegras, not on that level, but kind of becoming the player that could kind of pick up his team, similar to what McDavid does in Edmonton. But I have to say, Jonathan Quick on the Kings, still scary. Still scary.
Yeah. Yes. I know. The quickness is still there, believe it or not. So, all right. And just to wrap this up, Connor McDavid, going back to him, 29 points in 14 games. It's over 2 points a game, people. It's over 2 points a game.
Should we just give him the heart?
Just give him everything.
Already.
Except the cup. I don't want to give him that.
There was a stat that ESPN had the other night, that he is currently 3rd all time in points per game. And it was like Gretzky, Jagr, him.
Wow.
And I think like Messier.
Wow. So we're already putting him into the stat wise. We're already putting him into that company. That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. And was he halfway done? Like
500 career games thus far. Yeah.
Nuts. So, all right, everybody, that will wrap it up for today's episode of Locked On NHL. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, we'll go full screen with these standings so you can see them blown up one last time. We'll be back. I don't know if we're doing it this way every week. The powers that be just said we're going to do divisions this week, and we said okay. So who knows if we're coming back next week this way or the traditional 1 through 32. Either way, we'll be back next week for a brand new power ranking. For Mr. Adam Mixtape Denker over at Locked On Lightning, I'm Chris Maselli with Locked On Avalanche. Thank you for listening to Locked On NHL and making it your first listen of the day. Enjoy the games.